What is poppin', people, and welcome back to the channel. Before we What is poppin', people, and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be on beginner mistakes to avoid when tattooing. Now I've picked 5 mistakes because 5 seems to be my god, my voice is cracking. 5 seems to be the best number to have in the videos. I've looked at tips everywhere and 5 seems to be the magic number. So let's do 5 again. So tip number 1 would be not to get gas. No, I don't mean farting. I mean gear acquisition syndrome. Now, gear acquisition syndrome is when you feel like you cannot do a certain job unless you have the brand spanking new thing, or a certain object, like a certain tattoo machine or a certain stencil solution or a certain needle. You cannot do the job unless you have these things, and you cannot do the job good unless you have these things. Number 1, gas. Do not get caught up in gear acquisition syndrome. You can have a second-hand machine, you can use cheaper needles, and you can still do a really good job. You do not need all the best mod cons to do these things, so do not get caught up in gas. Now, tip number 2, expecting clients to come to you and not doing any advertising. Now, they say the best form of advertising is word of mouth. Don't think that you can just rely on word of mouth to generate clientele, because it's not going to happen. You still have to advertise, you still have to be active on social media, you still actively need to be pushing your brand, okay? So don't just rely on word of mouth. Word of mouth is a really good tool, and you'll do 1 tattoo and you might get 2 people from that. I'm not saying word of mouth isn't good at all, it is really good, but I'm just saying do not rely on word of mouth. I have no idea why my voice is so croaky. Oh. Is that better? Is that better? That doesn't seem better. Tip number 3. Please, and we are all guilty of it. It does not matter whether we are a beginner or we are a advanced pro level tattoo artist. We are all guilty of it, and that is seeing somebody's work and thinking, fuck me, I might as well just quit. So having that sort of attitude, especially when you're starting out, when you are just starting out, is really big. So tip number 3 is do not compare your chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 30. Think of it like an iceberg. You'll see the finished result on top, but underneath the waterline is a whole array of things that you have not seen. The whole amount of mistakes that they've put in, the whole amount of time and years they've put into the craft. You just see, what's above the surface, not what's below the surface. So do not be discouraged by looking at a piece and thinking you are never going to get there. I promise you that if you put the time in and you put the effort in, you will get there. But do not compare your own work to somebody else's work, whether it be a peer or whether it be somebody that you actually look up to in the industry. It's a really big mistake. It is really off-putting, and it can really put a downer on your mental well-being if you are constantly battling with the thoughts that you are never going to get better and you are never going to be as good as what this person is. So please do not compare your chapter 1 to their chapter 30. Do not worry about what everyone else is doing. Tip number 4 would be not being afraid to get a critique. Now, quick little story for you. I had been tattooing, maybe 6 years, and I went down to London Tattoo Convention at Tobacco Dock. Now, if you don't know, like in England, if you get to London, if you're an artist and you're working in London, you have made it. Let's say it's a really, really good convention. It's a really prestigious convention. It's an invite only convention. So if you get there, you are among the best, in my opinion. So I went down to Tobacco Dock, and I went and met my all-time favorite artist, which is Ralph Nonweiler. I went and actually met him, and I watched him for about an hour. It's got to have been about an hour. I'd actually come with some friends, and they were drinking, and I decided to use that time just to go and, just watch him for a bit. That makes my friends like sound really, really bad. Like they're only bothered about going down for a drink. They're not. But I went and saw Ralph. It took me 25 minutes to pluck up the courage to ask Ralph just to check out my work and give me a little bit of critique. I don't know why it took me so long. Like, I'd asked for critique loads of times on loads of other pieces, but I think it was because it was Ralph, and I really looked up to him as an artist. I was just so scared to get this critique, and I to this day I don't know why, but oh my god, it scared me. It took me about 25 minutes to pluck up the courage just to ask him. I think also as well it was the fact that he was working and I didn't want to interrupt him. He finally had a little pause in his tattoo, so I plucked up the courage and asked him for a critique. And it is the best thing that I ever did. Whether you are a beginner or an advanced tattoo artist, you are never too good to be critiqued. If you get to a point where you feel like you cannot be critiqued, then I don't really know what you're doing anymore, and you certainly aren't going to get any better. If you think you are dog's bollocks and you are king shit and you are the best thing ever and nobody can tell you that your work is wrong, then it is time to move aside and leave the game alone. So yeah, I got some critique from Ralph, and it's a really, really, really good thing to do. Could you get butthurt by it? Certainly. If you've done something that you're really proud of, and then people are there, you've asked for a critique and they're telling you, listen, your line work's shit, this black's not saturated well, your grey's not saturated well, your colour's not packed in really well, it's going to come out. All this really hurts, but it's part of the growing process. You cannot get better while somebody is telling you that you are the shit. You can only get better by people telling you that this is shit, this is shit, this is shit. So do not get discouraged. Ask for critique. Whenever you can ask for a critique by an artist that is way above you, then do it. Like, I went as far as going on Instagram and messaging loads and loads of artists, loads of black and grey artists and loads of colour artists. And I'm not talking about just like little artists that I know in the community. I'm talking about the big boys. I messaged all of them and asked for critique on my black and grey. Some got back to me and some didn't. Now, obviously, I'm not going to name names of who got back to me and who didn't, but just be prepared. It's nothing personal. Some will get back to you and some will not. So, critique. Have it done, guys. Get it done and get it wherever you can get it. Do not be afraid of it. Tip number 5. Do not be afraid to experiment. A lot of people, when you're first starting out, you like to use what you know. So you'll only use a certain needle or a certain ink or a certain technique because it's worked for you, and you don't want to move away from that because that's where you're comfortable. But do not be afraid to experiment with different needles, with different inks, with different techniques. Maybe you want to try like doing a different sort of background than you've done previously. Well, what you can do on that is you can explain to your client, your vision. Just pull your client up, say, yo, I've got this idea, what do you think of it? Or, hey man, like this piece is going to be really cool, but I've got an idea in my head that's going to make it so much better. The client will more than likely give you approval to go ahead and do your thing. This will in turn give you the confidence to try this new thing. Even if you do not like what you've done, odds are the client will. We're artists, so we like to critique everything that we do ourselves, but in the client's eyes, they are getting a really good tattoo still, so do not worry about it. But by them saying, yeah, go ahead, that'll give you the confidence to try new things. So don't be afraid to experiment. Definitely do not be afraid to experiment. It is a good thing to experiment. You know, yes, it is a client, and yes, it is skin, and you are messing with something that is on that client for life. But if you don't experiment, you will not grow. So you need to experiment. You know, you can start small. Try running your machine at a different voltage than you previously have. Try hanging your needle out more than you used to. Just try using a different black. And then once you start getting more and more and more experienced with experimenting, then go on to the bigger things that you want to experiment with, like new colors, different color theories, all the big stuff that maybe you want to work up to. But guys, that is my 5 beginner mistakes to avoid. Quickly running over them. Number 1, do not get caught up in gas gear acquisition syndrome. You can do tattoos without having all the latest mod cons. Number 2, expecting clients just to come to you by word of mouth. That's not always the case, so don't just expect that. Number 3, comparing your chapter 1 to somebody else's chapter 30. Seriously, that is a big one, guys. Do not get discouraged by what you are seeing. Simply concentrate on you and what you're doing and bettering yourself and your last tattoo. Number 4, being open to critique and not closing yourself off from critique. Critique will help you massively. It will help you a lot more than you actually think it probably will. And number 5, not being afraid to experiment. So guys, before you leave, please head over to my tattoo tips playlist as always and check out the array of videos we've got building on there. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. We are growing and I want to carry on growing, so please subscribe. Please turn on bell notifications to get notified every time I upload a new video. But guys, as always, I shall see you all in the next one. Adios.